Being a nonprofit organization, the client really had to make sure that it made sense and that it was not just labeling, but that it would give something back to the tenants. So Passive House was really something that we thought was worth it because it's not one of those certification that's really prescriptive and that you're just taking the list and checking boxes. It's more holistic and really aims at making sure that people are comfortable and that people spend less on energy bills.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Passive House podcast. I'm Zach Semke, Director of Passive House Accelerator, and I am very excited to have Mary James here. How's it going, Mary?
It's great. I'm up in your neck of the woods, but in the San Juan Islands, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, that is amazing. I am going to be there in a couple of weeks and I cannot wait. We are missing Matthew Cutler-Welsh today because he is traveling at the moment. So Mary and I will be doing the honors here. We've got a great interview that we're going to dive into about Le Monarch project in Quebec. But before we do, we have a few people to thank. I want to start by thanking Mithun as our accelerator partner of the week and helping us make all of our programming possible here this week at Passive House Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast. I'd also like to thank our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you too to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwool North America, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Thacro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, and Source 2050. So a big thank you to our sponsors. So with that, Mary, can you tell us a little bit about our guest?
Our guest is Vincent Bergeron, who's an architect with Equipe A, which is based in Quebec. And it's really exciting to have an 8-story Passive House building in Sherbrooke in Quebec. We were happy to hear all about the new Passive House buildings that are springing up in Quebec.
Indeed. Let's dive right in.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast. I'm Mary James, and I'm here with Jay Fox. And today we're speaking with Vincent Bergeron, who is an architect with Equipe A, based in Quebec. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me over. It's a pleasure.
And today we're going to talk about a project that you've been working on called Le Monarch. And can you start with just telling us some of the basics about the size, because it's a project that's unique for Quebec, right? So can you tell us about some of the basics of the size and what kind of project it is?
Yeah, so it's 134 units of social housing that are guaranteed to be kept affordable for the next minimum 35 years. It's based in Sherbrooke, which is a mid-sized city. It's, I think, the 7th or 6th most populated city in the province of Quebec. It's on a site that is roughly 170,000 square foot. There's a small stream on one side which forbade us to use nearly 1/5 of the site. And also there's quite a lot of topography. The site is sloping towards the rear of site. For the building itself, it's a building that is 8 floors tall. We also included 2 levels of parking and technical spaces below grade. And the building itself is considered as a high rise as per our provincial code. So it was a little trickier than what we usually do. We don't see a lot of 8 floor buildings in Sherbrooke usually, but nowadays we tend to see more and more buildings rising up. And another maybe interesting information is that with the the envelope to floor ratio, so the form factor of the building itself is around 1.1. So usually in the literature for passive house, we see such building around 0.8 being the ideal, but we were a little bit over this form factor ideal, since passive house was not really something we were aiming at first, and that came into play later on.
I didn't realize that. Are there any type of amenity spaces, like, I don't know, a gym or kind of social services or anything like that within the envelope?
We do have some amenities. So there is a 100 guest common room for any events that the organism that was our client can use for. And also there's a small lounge on the second floor. And we also tried to integrate a small park in front of the building with plenty of trees to be planted around the playground for kids. Because when we were conceiving the project, one of the important things in the brief was that the client wanted a project that also included not only 1 bedroom apartments, but also around 16 2 bedrooms and 16 3 bedroom apartments for families. So they asked us to think of some way to integrate the playground for those families. Yeah.
Just one other question kind of came to mind, but because I didn't look exactly where the project is on like a map. How close is it to like downtown and amenities, and not amenities, but shopping or laundry or any other?
So it's really in an up and coming neighborhood. It's on the outskirts of the city itself. But a fun fact in Sherbrooke is that it's really not only an education oriented city, but it also has 2 hospitals that are really renowned, especially for the children. So it's a pediatric centric hospital over there. And it was built outside of the city itself, the biggest of those 2 hospitals. And now they're trying to link the city and the hospital with neighborhoods. So it's really on an axis of transportation that is important. And also, they've been developing more and more restaurants, shopping centers, and so on this axis.
That's great that for social housing to be on such a centralized area, where you can easily get to shopping centers. And
yeah, that and they have bike path close by, and it's being somewhat on the outskirts also gives the future tenants an incredible view. I was visiting the work site, I'd say 2 weeks ago, with a group of students that are studying architecture at well, you don't have those in the United States, but here we have university. So you have to go to the university to become an architect, but you can also just become an architectural technologist, I guess I'd traduce it to. And we were visiting the work site with that group of students. And even on the 6th floor, the view was breathtaking. It's incredible. So I guess the tenants will be quite lucky. They'll have even a better view than I have from my backyard.
So I'm really curious, because you did bring up that passive house was not originally your goal. How did Equipe A get involved in the project? And tell us some more about how passive house became one of the goals for the project.
So initially, this project is funded partially by the Quebec Affordable Housing Program, and you have to submit a project and be approved. The client had qualified for the program on another site with a project that was really different. It was low rise, really spread out on a site that was way bigger than ours is. And he had to start from scratch because he lost the site for XYZ reason. So he had to put up a new team. We were the first professional he went to. So we started from scratch with 6 months left on a 12-month schedule because of the program itself. Of course, you can get an extension under specific conditions, which we met in the end, but it was quite a ride. And we quickly put together a team that included all the professionals we needed. We got a contractor around the table to make sure that what we designed was buildable and made sense in regards to budget and so on. And we implemented a BIM process to optimize the workflow and create a workspace that was as transparent as possible. But even then, we didn't know exactly where we were going because in the program itself that we had to requalify for eventually, you can get some grants for environmental measures. So we were having talks with the team, and we were trying to figure out how we could create as much potential as possible for the project while also making sure that we could find some other grants to cover for the overcost, because being social housing, obviously you have to find creative ways to finance the project itself. This was one of the key conditions from the client if we had any ideas that were out of the box. So one of the team member, which is a mechanical engineer that specializes in energy efficiency, his name is Raphaël Boisjoli, and he's now a member of Maison Passive Quebec, so Passive House Quebec. And he proposed that we aim for this certification. And as soon as I heard that, I told my co-project manager, Olivier Bousquet, that we had to do it. He was I'd say the client link. So he was the main architect. I was assisting him in every other aspect of the project, but he had to be convinced to be able to convince the client. So we wrapped up a proposal, made sure that we could get some other grants than the affordable program itself, and we finally got the client on board. But I'd say it was one of the tricky negotiations that we have because the client had no clue what passive house meant. She even after many explanations, she was just okay. Does it work financially? Will it be a better environment for the tenants? Yes. Okay, I give you my approval. Yeah. So she really trusted us in that. And being a nonprofit organization, the client really had to make sure that it made sense and that it was not just labeling, but that it would give something back to the tenants. So Passive House was really something that we thought was worth it because it's not one of those certifications that's really prescriptive and that you're just taking the list and checking boxes. It's more holistic and really aims at making sure that people are comfortable and that people spend less on energy bills.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And was kind of the idea of using prefabricated panels, was that a decision that was made early on and kind of helped with some of the financing, or was that a decision that kind of came later after massing and other things?
It was something that the contractor brought up in the early stages of the project, even before Passive House came into play. So there are different levels of prefabrication. For the project, we have I'd say, a low level of prefabrication if you want, but it's something that's really not usual in our province at least. So we used prefabricated steel stud assemblies for all the interior partitions and the exterior walls. So obviously for interior partitions, it's mostly just the steel framing. It saves a little time, but it's not that big of a deal. And for the building enclosure, they were able to produce panels that included not only the steel framing, but also the exterior sheeting, which is a fiberglass matte gypsum board. And they were able to install the air and vapor barrier on the gypsum board. And it was all made so it could be handled with 2 workers on site and didn't require any scaffolding for installation. So it's really a question of saving time, money, and getting the building as airtight as possible, as fast as possible. And one of the perks of working with that is also that the studs are produced to length by the subcontractor that produces those panels. So typically, you have standard lengths that are cut, generating tons of waste, which we didn't have in this project.
Yeah, it sounds like it really helped you to achieve efficiency in several ways. But so you're saying the prefabricated exterior assembly panels had steel studs, and then were they insulated, the panels?
No, not they don't come insulated. They insulate them on site because they still have to do some transition. The building itself, because it is a high rise and also because it's an apartment building, we opted for a concrete structure. So at each floor slab, the exterior wall just ends underneath the slab and starts over the slab. We decided that we would use what we called perfect wall. So all the insulation is on the outside of the structure and outside of the air and vapor barrier. And this really helped a lot to achieve passive house performance levels.
Right. And so what did you use for that exterior insulation? What product?
It was really a no-brainer for us because the go-to product for a perfect wall is rock wool. So we used 8 inches of cavity rock, and having 8 inches of insulation, obviously you have to think of, okay, I have brick that I need to fix to the wall. I have aluminum panels that I have to fix to the wall. So depending on if we're in a section of brick or aluminum panels, we have thermal masonry anchors that go through the insulation. And for the aluminum panels, we have TS thermal clips from Suprema that allow us really to have the best, I'd say, cost to efficiency ratio. The overall effective R value of our walls was between 32 and 38, which is way better than what you would see if you would build as per code. And that is really way better than what you can see as the architectural production of Quebec. Energy being so cheap, the industry is not really looking into insulating more than what they need. So also one of the reasons that we like Rockwool for such building is that our code asks us to have only non-combustible elements when they're exposed in a wall cavity. And also they ask us to abide by certain standard that ask us to have a certain depth for that cavity. So Rockwool just becomes a no-brainer because you don't have to have fire blocks at each floor. You don't have to protect fire from spreading all over the place. It does the trick, and it's non-combustible, unaffected by water, moisture resistant, and so on. It's everything you want. And rumor has it, I even spread some Rockwool on my toast in the morning because on each and every single project, people ask me how are we gonna build a wall. The easiest answer is Rockwool. Even though it's not the most effective R value per inch, it really does the trick for the rest. We thought it could be a good idea. We considered using more thermally efficient insulation on the first 6 inches of our wall, and then covering it up with 2 inches of rock wool, which at first seems a good idea and would still meet the code requirements. But when you start scratching and when you start digging into all the implications and the fact that you have to wrap that non-combustible insulation at each and every single opening, even ducts for air, windows, doors, it just becomes a mess. So for simplicity of construction and all the key feature of the product, Rockwool was really a no-brainer.
So construction started last August, is that correct?
Yep, we were able to finally start in August. We really had a lot of issues with the program, with the city, with so on. So we had been working for a year on the plans, and we were trying to get approval for the project and jumping through every single hoops of the program itself, but also for the city. And the project is now under construction and should be delivered, I think, somewhere next year. Right now, they're pouring the seventh floor and closing the envelope as they're going. I think they're on the third or fourth floor right now.
Talking about insulation still, I wasn't sure, I may have missed this, but do you have any onboard insulation and like cavities between the exterior wall and like the drywall?
Don't have anything in the steel studs. It's really all outside of the exterior sheeting. The only padding that we used is in the parapets, the duct or pipe penetration, and other such construction that are mainly on the rooftop. And obviously, once again, rock wool comes into play. Comfort bath is our go-to because what we want is to fill every single unheated air cavity to make sure that there's no risk of condensation in relations to convection, because the climate in Eastern Canada is kind of tricky. You're pretty cold during the winter, but also really hot in the summer. And in the winter, you have extreme temperature, and it can be minus 30 at night. But during the day, if you have a black surface, that surface can come up to, I'd say, 10 degrees. So it's a 40 degrees Celsius gap. I'm sorry, I'm not good with Fahrenheit, but
Okay.
it's really tricky on the materials, and it puts a lot of stress on our buildings.
And I'm noticing some balconies on there, which I didn't know were there. Was there any kind of tricky transitions between the balconies and the interior that needed, extra Rockwell love, or was that?
These were pretty tricky to handle. We knew that working with a concrete building and that with the recent code that was adopted in Quebec, we had to think of some way to have a thermal break over there. So we knew that there were products out there that could do this and so on, but we also knew that the delays related to ordering those products and the cost of them are really prohibitive. So what we came up with was a solution that was designed in collaboration with our structural engineer and the contractor. And it's really a homemade thermal break with polyurethane insulation in between the concrete structure and the concrete balcony. But we had to make some choices at one point, because one of our philosophy is using the right material at the right place. As I said, for the main insulation, Rockwool is a go-to, but in some areas, it's really tricky to work with. So when you come up to the balcony, you have a true wall flashing to manage. You have this thermal break that we designed. You have to be able to get your membrane in there just to make sure that it's air and watertight. And obviously, you don't have a lot of space to work with. So using polyurethane over there gives us a boost in insulation. The R value per inch is just like rock wool is 4.2 and polyurethane is somewhere around 6 to 6.6 depending on the literature and the product you're using. So the boost we had there in conjunction with the fact that we had thermal bridge made it somewhat really good when comparing to, I'd say, pre-made thermal break. The pre-made thermal break, of course, it's better, but you have to make some concessions on performance in relation to price when you're working on social housing, because money just doesn't grow on trees, obviously.
Is it still part of the floor plate? Like I'm guessing this is like a post-tension concrete slab. Is the balcony like an extension of that, or did you somehow separate that to get
No, there's really a separation. So what we did is the balconies all being inset. The only effort is gravitational. So you don't have any moment in there or anything. So the engineer was quite pleased with that. And what he designed is what he calls in French. So it's just a steel assembly of plates on both sides with Nelson studs and a steel plate that goes through the insulation at a certain spacing, and the spacing being big enough and the insulation being good enough where we really have a good detail there that we even used on later projects. Our passive house certifier modeled it in 3D. And when we got the results, we were like, okay, so we have the choice between the expensive way that will get us to passive house for sure, or we have the Pataclan, which will also get us to passive house, but at a way lower cost. And also the fact that it's a steel assembly that you can ask any steel fabricator to make. They send it to galvanization, and after that, there's no worries about it. So it was something that we were quite proud. Our structural engineer that is here in Quebec, he really whooped something out of his hat. It's a magic trick. And now that we've tried this solution, not only on the Monarch but also on other projects, the concrete workers are unanimous. It's magical. It's perfect. We've thought about everything with the contractor and the engineer to make it so that it's really easy to put in place. You cast your interior slab. If you want to cast the balcony right away, you can do it. If you want to wait because you don't have the right temperature and so on, you can also wait. So in the building sequence, it's really important to think about such details when you're working on building of this scope.
Speaking of details, can you tell us a little bit about the foundation? You said you have 2 subfloors. There's garage down there. And so was there anything particular about the foundation that you had to do in order to meet passive house?
Okay, full disclosure. The 2 basement levels were excluded from certification because there are too many components that do not meet the performance required for passive house. The garage doors are horrible when it comes to air tightness, and we didn't want to put money in the comfort of the tenants' cars. We wanted to put the money somewhere else. So we still have a pretty good envelope that meets code down there, but we insulated the ground floor slab underneath to make sure that it would work in the PHPP and that we would meet passive house performance level. But the foundation is quite typical. We had good carrying capacity, so there's no piles or anything. We used polystyrene, and having topography on the site made it easy to get access to the parking garage, because the slope makes it so that while you're heading towards the rear of the site, you can get in the first basement floor, and at the rear of the site, you're at the level of the second basement floor. So what we like to do in the office is also to analyze the site and see how we can make the most out of it. When we got the developer's plan, the building was an L that was oriented towards the street. But seeing the topography and seeing the brief, I was working with Olivier, and we told ourselves, what if we just take it and make a 180-degree turn with the building? What happens then? So you generate this little park that I was mentioning early on, and that you can see right there. And it just became magical. We used the topography to hide the parking and the basement and the generator, because we're high rise. And also we were generating this public space in front in a neighborhood that is up and coming, but doesn't have a park right now. And also the park is adjacent to the stream that I mentioned earlier. So when you have a stream in Quebec, and I guess in most places, you have to keep a certain space around the stream as preservation. And that combined with the park just becomes a new world and offers the tenants that are inside the elbow of the L a magical place. I was on site, as I said earlier, and I could just see it, and I'm just looking forward to seeing it in 10 years. It's going to be amazing.
That's great. This is jumping ahead a bit, but I just wanted to, I guess, speaking of orientation, and I mean, did you try to take advantage of kind of solar gains and other elements of passive heating just from, trying to move the building around the property?
I wish we did, but as I said, passive house wasn't something that we had in mind at first. We're working right now on another project that will aim for passive house as well. But what we realized is that there is, if you're looking to make a passive house project, don't be dogmatic. Yes, you have to meet the performance of passive house, but you also have to keep in mind the construction costs, and you also have to keep in mind that there are other considerations with regards to a project. And one of them is that in the end, even if you'd like not to have anything on the north side of the building to maximize solar gains, it's not efficient. Having a corridor that doesn't have apartments on both sides just really gets you to create a floor to envelope ratio that's abysmal. And also it makes it way too expensive. That, or you have really deep apartments that don't have any access to light. So we managed with the design that we had made before passive house was a consideration. But looking back at it, I'm not sure that it would have changed that much. We're not far from having a pretty good orientation with the building, and even though those north-oriented apartments still get some indirect solar heat gain, which is super counterintuitive. But when you get the passive house formation, they make you feel the PHPP, and you just realize that, okay, even a fully north orientated wall will get some solar heat gains. And of course, in Eastern Canada, you want to make the most out of those heat gains, but at the same time, as I said earlier, you have two extremes. In winter, it's minus 30, but in the summer, it can be 30 or 35 as well. And we see more and more heat and heat waves year after year. So yes, you can try to maximize heat gain, but if you lose sight of the big picture and only focus on passive house, you're gonna make choices that might make your project suboptimal.
I mean, that's a perfect segue into talking about overheating, which of course passive house also can help address overheating if you have the whole system in mind. And I wondered if that was a concern for this building and if you needed any active or passive shading elements at all.
We were kind of lucky because the balconies being inset and the walls being very thick with the position of the window in the wall composition, and the fact that most of our windows are in the deep end of the inset, we have a lot of windows that get shading either partially or totally during those hot summer days. But in the winter, the sun being lower, you get the heat gains that you want to get. And a strategy that we used to mitigate overheating was having operable windows for natural ventilation, obviously, and having also heat pumps that can be used either for cooling or heating. And as for passive shading elements, we didn't want to include such elements for mainly two reasons. The first is where the project is in an architectural integration sector, so it wouldn't talk to the other buildings in the neighborhood, and also that over time and a lot of times when we're thinking about a new brief, we try to make sure that we don't incorporate elements in the design that can be easily removed. Because if it's easily removable, when budget comes into play, it's going to be removed. You can be sure of that. And it's, I guess it's not only in Quebec, but design is not always something that has value in itself. So you have to make the most out of your choice to make it look good and make sure that your design stays in the end. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed.
Got it. Mentioned windows, and I'm just curious, and there's probably doors for the balconies as well. Who is the manufacturer for those?
So the manufacturer for those is Nick. We contacted manufacturers all over the place in BC, in Europe, tried to find a product that would meet the performance that we needed. Because as I mentioned earlier, the industry in Quebec is the energy is way too cheap. So they don't try to build better. It's starting to change, but we were pleasantly surprised to see that Isothermic was working on getting a line of product that meets passive house standards and that will be certified eventually. We were like, they were in the process of having the thermal simulation to have certification and so on. So the windows that are installed on the project are not the final windows. We were able to have them make some adjustments to make sure that they meet the certification eventually. And Amic is a company that is really close to Sherbrooke. They manufacture over in Telford, so it's next door. So that really pleased us, being able to work with a local partner and not wait for for weeks to have a shipping container arrive from Europe or British Columbia and open it just to be surprised with, well, are the windows okay? And we also included some curtain walls that are a little special since the glazing is vacuum insulated glazing units. So it's a product that we're not used to seeing. It's the first time we're working with such product, but the the they can have a glazing unit that's really thinner than a triple glazed high-end unit, but that's, I'd say, double the R value. So it really helped a lot with the performance and the PHPP. And the provider for those products, the glazing units, is Prelco. So it's also a local manufacturer.
So this is as you have mentioned, new for when you were doing this building, working with Passive House was new for your team. And was it also new for the construction firm, the contractor? And how did you work with them to make sure that Passive House best practices were being followed?
Well, the contractor is a regional player, and they're growing quite a lot, and they're really nice to work with because they were on board with the idea of building better. They wanted to achieve the same goal. So the decider over there were on board. Obviously, the workers had a little more effort to get on board because when you change the way people work, usually any change will create a visceral reaction. So what they did is they introduced the important aspects of PH construction to all workers and subcontractors and created checklists and made sure that people were accountable for what they build by having the checklists accompanied with photos that had to be taken at different steps of the building sequence to make sure that everything was done right. The increased accountability and the philosophy of the project has seduced a lot of people that were at first not really on board, but eventually workers were motivated to make sure that they get things right, and they even became proud of what they were doing instead of trying to work fast. Also, the contractor at one point, professionals being professionals and contractors being contractors, the contractor wanted to make sure that we got things right on the plans. So we took our plans and sent them to Morrison Hirschfield for review. And once we received the comments, we were like, okay, it's a done deal. We know how to build. And the contractor was pleased because everything that got out was really minimal. And in the end, it came up to make sure that you follow the manufacturer's installation requirements and make sure that you follow the plans. So we were pleased with that. And they still have an open contract with Morrison Hirschfield so that if ever they have questions, they can ask. So sometimes getting the right people around the table and making sure that you're able to ask a question to someone that has done it before or that knows how to work around those issues that you can meet in a PH construction is really key to success.
That is excellent advice. And on that note, just as a because we're about to reach our hour here, and I don't want to keep you too long, but any other just kind of general advice for someone who's starting out on their first passive house project, what would you tell them from the get-go?
I'd say probably three things. The first is try to be humble, as humble as possible. I know that architects can seem to not be able to do that, but you don't have all the answers, and any preconceptions that you might have might not be the correct answer. So try to be humble. Second, I'd say teamwork is the dream work. If you surround yourself with the right team, and we're quite lucky here at the office because the people in the drawing room, the people that do the site surveying, and the architects, everyone, there is a high level of knowledge, but also we were able to make sure that the people that we got on the project team, so the engineers, the contractor, and so on, they're people that we've been working with for years now, and that we've really been able to develop a relationship that's good, and that allowed us to be confident that we would work towards a mutual goal. And the last thing is keep an open mind. It's make sure that you explore different options. Make sure that you confront your ideas with data and with simulation and with testing. Sometimes the solution can seem ideal, but once you start digging, you just realize it's not the right one for the project. And ask questions. People have made mistakes before you. So you're not going to get it 100% right the first time, but I'd say 90% or 80% is better than zero.
Yeah, I'd say. Well, I think that's gonna wrap us up. Vincent, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Mary, do you have anything to add?
No, that sounds like really solid advice. I guess one final question is, so your team is working on other passive house buildings. Can you just give us a very brief description of those?
Yes, we're looking at a project that is 400 units in 3 separate buildings, 2 around 6 floors, one that should end up around 12 to 14 floor. It's really close to the Monarch, actually. And having learned about the project, another nonprofit approached us and said, okay, we want to get on board too. And so we're not necessarily going for the same certification. The Monarch is Passive House International Low Energy Building. And now we're maybe looking into FUS because it's a little different. It might even open up some options that are different. And it's also a great project. It's affordable housing, really family oriented, a lot of vegetation and so on. So we're working on it right now. I took a little of my time, but it should be something to look forward to in the near future. And it was really a pleasure, Jay and Mary, to be on your podcast and having this talk. We're always happy to share and talk about what we're doing, since it's really a pride to be part of such projects.
Okay, welcome back. That was a really great interview. Thank you to Mary and Jay for making that happen. Mary, what were some of the key takeaways for you from that conversation?
Well, I love the very beginning that how they talked the client into being interested in Passive House, that she wanted to know, is this going to be a better environment for the tenants? And obviously, we know the answer to that,
Right.
as well as, of course, is it going to work financially? But I thought that was, great attitude and a great way to promote Passive House.
Yeah, definitely. I was also struck by the panelization solution and his motivation around that, around making everything as airtight as possible, as fast as possible. That seemed like pretty central to their approach to the envelope.
Yes, it really did. Saved a little time, but also, most importantly, cut down on construction waste, because the panels, the lengths for the framing could be cut just for the panels instead of, getting standard size. So I thought that was great.
Another thing that stood out was their bespoke solution to the thermal bridging of the balconies and breaking that potential thermal break. It looks like it sounded like they might have a potential patent on their hands.
Right. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of thought put into that. And, in general, they had a lot of focus on using local products in order to, you know, which it seems in order to cut down on shipping and the embodied carbon of that, not to mention also to be able to control um, the getting the products that they needed in a timely manner. So that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always nice to see alignment of different goals happen kind of organically. And so that the anecdote about the flipping the L of the building, partly motivated by the orientation, the passive orientation of the building, but also achieving essentially the setback from the stream to help protect that environmental asset, right, was great. It was good to hear.
Right. I mean, it's really great to have a project that brings so many amenities to the tenants, in addition to all the comfort that you get from Passive House. And yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a wonderful place to live. And that he was able to have it come together, even though it was his first Passive House project. He was able to have it come together by getting the right team together and having all the regular team communication. And I just love that quote that he said, what we realize if you're looking to make a Passive House project is you don't have to be dramatic. I just thought that was great. You know, that, yeah, flipping the L around and creating this beautiful park. And that did mean that there were some of the apartments facing north, but it still worked. He still was
Yeah.
able to make the project work.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like they're gonna have some great views too, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
That's fun. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for bringing that to us, Mary, and also Jay. Appreciate it. Let's dive into a couple of cool things that are coming up with the Passive House Accelerator. We have we have a special Passive House component spotlight that introduces Smart Rock, which is an all-in-one interior continuous insulation, air tightness, and vapor control solution that combines rock wool with Proclima's Intello Plus. So this is a special component spotlight with Rockwool and 475 high performance building supply that will be happening on Thursday, May 22nd. So go to the Passive House Accelerator website to get details about that, and we'll include a link to it, of course, in the show notes as well. Then our big announcement for events coming up includes June 12th, Reimagine Buildings 25. This is our annual global online conference that will be taking place from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern on June 12th. And the theme of Reimagine Buildings 25 is past, present, and future. So past, exploring transformative projects that are revitalizing and repurposing our existing building stock. Present, which is celebrating groundbreaking designs that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the built environment. So new construction. And future, diving into next-gen materials, cutting-edge technologies, and the future of resilient climate positive buildings. Our programs manager is curating a really exciting lineup of speakers. And there's lots of details to dive into around that. And we hope that everyone will join us on June 12th for this really amazing event. Please visit passivehouseaccelerator.com to get information about that as well. And looking forward to seeing everybody on June 12th for that event. And then over at the Reimagine Buildings Collective, we've got some great programming happening as well. So for those who don't know, the Reimagine Buildings Collective is our membership community where we bring together building professionals ready to tackle climate change to share knowledge, level up our skills, and build powerful relationships so that we can create the healthiest, most sustainable buildings, deliver them cost effectively, and thrive in the process. And we've got a bunch of cool coursework available on the collective, as well as Ask Me Anything sessions with experts and residents. We're also launching a new series of interviews or fireside chats with Michael Ingui called Reimagine Tuesdays. And that's going to be rotating between 3 different kinds of episodes. Reimagine Design, where we're looking at architecture and passive house and zero carbon building. Reimagine Construction, and Reimagine Materials. So on May 20th, we'll be joined by Tessa Bradley of Artisans Group for an interview with Michael for Reimagine Design. And then May 27th, we'll be joined by Mike Steffen for an interview about Reimagine Construction. Each of these events will also end with lively Q&A with folks in the audience, and it should be great. I think that pretty much wraps up our announcements for today. Is there anything else you want to add, Mary?
No, but that June 12th events, that's going to be super exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. It is going to be great. Cool. I think that wraps up this episode of Passive House Podcast. And please do, if you haven't already, give us a like or hit the 5-star rating for the show so that we can get in front of more people. We'd love to also get your comments in the ratings, or you can email us at podcast@passivehouseaccelerator.com if you have any comments or suggestions for programming. Thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate you being part of all of this and this movement. We appreciate it.